One morning inside the most secure prison in America, a guard walks into a cell to wake up a prisoner. The man is still lying in bed under his blanket, completely motionless. The guard pulls the blanket away, but instead of a prisoner, there is a fake human head staring back at him. Within seconds, alarms begin echoing across the entire prison. 3 prisoners have vanished from Alcatraz. No one saw them escape. No one knows how they got out. So how did they manage to escape from the most secure prison in America? Stay tuned and watch till the end. In January 1960, a criminal named Frank Morris arrives at Alcatraz, one of the most secure prisons in America. The prison is located on an isolated island surrounded by the cold waters of the ocean, and no prisoner has ever managed to escape from it. Frank Morris, however, is known for escaping from several prisons before, which is exactly why the authorities decided to send him to Alcatraz. When Frank arrives, the guards search him carefully before escorting him inside the prison. Soon after, he is taken to meet the warden.
Ward wants to see you.
The warden warns him that no one has ever escaped from Alcatraz and that no one ever will.
Alcatraz was built to keep all the rotten eggs in one basket. No one has ever escaped from Alcatraz, and no one ever will.
While the warden is speaking, Frank quietly steals a small nail clipper from the desk without being noticed. Later in the dining hall, Frank meets another inmate named Litmus, a strange prisoner who keeps a pet rat with him. Litmus treats the rat like a friend and even shares his food with it. While Frank is talking with him, he notices another inmate named Wolf staring at him and making inappropriate gestures, but Frank ignores him. That same day, while the prisoners are in the shower area, Wolf approaches Frank again and tries to harass him. This time, Frank loses his patience, and a fight breaks out between them. Frank manages to beat Wolf badly in the shower. After this incident, Frank is later assigned work in the prison library. While working there, he meets another inmate named English. English is serving 2 life sentences for killing 2 white men in self-defense.
I got 2 99-year sentences, back to back.
And during their conversations, the two begin to develop a respectful friendship. Around this time, Frank also meets an elderly prisoner named Doc, spends most of his time painting portraits to deal with the loneliness of prison life. In many of his paintings, Doc includes chrysanthemums, small flowers that he draws as a symbol of freedom and the human spirit. However, Frank's conflict with Wolf does not end. One day in the prison yard, Wolf suddenly attacks Frank again, this time with a knife. A violent struggle follows before the guards rush in and stop the fight. Because of this attack, both Frank and Wolf are punished and sent to solitary confinement in the hole. Inside the solitary cell, Frank is treated harshly and suffers through the brutal conditions of isolation. After spending some time there, he is finally released and returned to the normal prison routine. Around this time, he becomes more familiar with the inmate in the neighboring cell, a man named Charlie Butts. The two begin talking through the bars of their cells and gradually get to know each other. One day, during an inspection of the prison cells, the warden enters Doc's cell and notices the paintings hanging on the walls. Curious, he begins looking through them. The portraits of the guards are respectful and flattering. However, one painting has been turned away from view. He discovers that it is a portrait of himself. Unlike the other paintings, this one shows the harsh and cruel side of his personality. Furious at what he sees, the warden immediately orders the guards to remove the paintings and strips Doc of his painting privileges.
I want painting privileges taken away from Chester Dalton.
Painting had been the only thing helping Doc endure life in prison, and losing it completely breaks his spirit. The next day, while the prisoners are working in the prison workshop, Doc reaches a breaking point. Without warning, he grabs a hatchet and cuts off his own fingers. The guards quickly rush him away while the other prisoners watch in shock. Later, Frank discovers that before the incident, Doc had slipped a chrysanthemum blossom into his pocket. The small flower reminds Frank of Doc and the hope for freedom that the old man had held onto. Back in his cell, Frank begins carefully examining the walls around him. One night, he notices something unusual about the ventilation grill inside his cell. When he touches the concrete around it, he realizes that it feels weak and brittle. That is when the idea of escaping from Alcatraz begins to take shape in his mind. One day in the dining hall, Frank meets 2 prisoners named John Anglin and Clarence Anglin. The 3 men already know each other because they had previously been imprisoned together in Atlanta. During their conversation, they begin talking about how everyone believes that escaping from Alcatraz is impossible.
Is it true no one's ever bust out of here?
So they tell me.
Jesus.
Later that night, after the guards complete their rounds, Frank takes out the nail clipper that he had secretly stolen from the warden's desk. Using it, he begins scratching the wall around the ventilation grill in his cell. As he continues, he realizes that the old plaster is coming off more easily than he expected. Around this time, Charlie but receives a visit from his wife. During the visit, she tells him that his mother is seriously ill and may not have much time left.
Your mom is going to die.
Hearing this deeply upsets Charlie. After returning to his cell that night, he tells Frank that if there is any plan to escape from Alcatraz, he wants to be part of it.
If you ever try to get out of here, I want in.
The next morning, while they are together in the dining hall, Frank explains his idea to the others. He tells them that the prison walls have weakened over time because of the constant moisture from the ocean. If they remove the ventilation grills and dig through the concrete behind them, they may be able to reach the empty space behind the cells. However, escaping the cells is only part of the problem. Even if they manage to get out of the prison building, they will still have to cross the freezing waters surrounding the island. Frank then turns to Clarence and tells him that since he works in the prison laundry, he should secretly collect raincoats whenever he gets the chance. These raincoats could later be used to build a raft for crossing the water. The others agree to help.
I'm in.
Me too.
Wanna go?
And that night Frank begins digging again. Charlie watches the corridor carefully so he can warn Frank if a guard comes near. However, the nail clipper quickly becomes worn out, and digging with it becomes very difficult. Frank's hands become badly injured from the effort. The next morning, Frank tells the others about the problem. While they are talking, he notices a spoon and suddenly comes up with another idea. Frank takes the spoon and rubs it against his shoe to make it look dirty and damaged. Then he calls the guard over and shows him the spoon, asking if it can be replaced.
A chance of exchanging the spoon? Looks like it's been sticking in someone's ass.
The guard agrees and allows Frank to exchange it for a new one. While this is happening, John Anglin distracts the guard with small talk. During the exchange, Frank quietly takes 2 spoons instead of 1 and hides them. Later, Frank goes to Litmus and borrows a coin from him. That night in his cell, Frank lights a small fire and heats the metal spoons. Using the heat, he fuses one of the spoons with the nail clipper he stole earlier. By combining the 2 pieces of metal, he manages to create a stronger digging tool. With the new tool ready, Frank begins working on the wall again. This time, the tool works much better, and he is able to remove more of the weakened concrete around the vent. While Frank is digging, a guard begins walking toward the cells. Charlie is watching the corridor and suddenly notices the guard approaching. To warn Frank, Charlie quickly makes a loud noise as a signal. Hearing the signal, Frank immediately covers the hole in the wall and jumps back onto his bed. Just moments later, the guard passes by the cell. From the outside, it looks like Frank is simply lying in bed, so the guard continues his round without noticing anything unusual. Over the next several days, Frank continues digging through the wall little by little. Whenever he leaves the cell block during the day, he secretly carries some of the dirt in his pockets and quietly drops it in the prison yard. Eventually, Frank realizes that even if he finishes digging, he will still need a special tool to remove the metal grill covering the opening. While working in the prison workshop, Frank secretly creates a small tool that can cut through the metal. To avoid suspicion, he also holds a separate piece of iron in his hand while using one of the machines. When the machine triggers an alarm, the guards come over and confiscate the piece of iron he was holding. This had been Frank's plan all along, because the real tool is hidden inside his shoe. Later, back in his cell, Frank uses the hidden tool to cut through the grill. After some effort, he manages to remove it. At the same time, Charlie, John, and Clarence begin doing the same thing in their own cells. Phase 1 of their escape plan is finally complete. After removing the ventilation grills from their cells, the next part of the plan begins. The group now needs a way to fool the guards during the night checks so their escape will not be noticed immediately. To do this, they decide to make fake heads that will be placed on their pillows to make it look like they are sleeping in their beds. Each person takes responsibility for part of the work. John steals human hair from the prison barbershop, Charlie arranges paint, and Frank collects old newspapers from the prison library. Using plaster from the wall they had been digging through and mixing it with the paper, they begin shaping the material into heads. After the shapes dry, they carefully paint them to look like real faces. Finally, they attach the hair so the figures resemble real prisoners lying in bed. Frank also paints a fake ventilation grill so that the opening in the wall will not be noticed during inspections. One night, Frank decides to climb through the opening to see what lies beyond the wall. Before leaving, he places the fake head on his bed and covers it with a blanket. Then he climbs through the vent and moves along the pipes behind the cells until he reaches the upper part of the building. While exploring the area, he discovers a metal door above that could possibly lead to the roof. However, the door is positioned too high for him to reach by himself. While Frank is outside the cell, a guard comes during the night patrol. Just in time, Frank manages to return through the vent and get back into his bed. The next morning, Frank tells the others about the metal door he discovered.
I went up on top last night. Saw the ventilator shaft to the roof, but I can't reach it. I'm gonna need a boost.
That night, Frank and John go back to inspect it more closely. John lifts Frank onto his shoulders so he can reach the door. After examining it carefully, Frank realizes that if they can cut through the metal barrier, they will be able to reach the roof. Now they just need the right tool to cut through it. The next day, while the prisoners are attending their music class, Frank notices a broken fan in the room. Looking at it closely, he realizes that it might be useful for making the tool they need. When the class ends, Frank quietly places the fan inside an instrument case and walks out of the room without drawing attention. Later, he takes the fan apart and uses its motor to build a small device that can cut through metal. That night, Frank and John return to the metal door above the cells. Frank climbs onto John's shoulders and begins cutting through the metal barrier using the tool he built. The cutting creates some noise, and a few guards hear something unusual. However, they ignore it and continue their rounds. After working on it for some time, Frank finally manages to cut through the metal barrier. With the path now open, they quickly return to their cells before anyone notices their absence. The following day, while the prisoners are watching a movie together, Frank, Charlie, John, and Clarence agree on the final step of their plan. They decide that they will attempt their escape on Tuesday night.
Tuesday night we go.
On Tuesday morning, while the prisoners are having breakfast in the dining hall, Frank places a chrysanthemum flower on the table in memory of Doc. The warden notices this and walks over to him. He reminds Frank about the prison rules and then crushes the flower in his hand. Seeing this, Litmus becomes extremely upset and suddenly attacks the warden. In the middle of the confrontation, Litmus suffers a heart attack and collapses on the floor. Later that evening, the warden grows suspicious and orders a search of Frank's cell. Guards carefully inspect the entire cell looking for anything unusual. However, they fail to notice the fake grill and find nothing that could reveal the escape plan. After the search, the warden tells the guard that Frank should be transferred to another cell. The guard replies that he will first complete the paperwork and then move him. Around the same time, Wolf is released from solitary confinement after several months. He still wants revenge on Frank and begins looking for a chance to attack him again. Before Wolf can make his move, English steps in and stops him, saving Frank from another confrontation. That night, the escape finally begins. After the prison becomes quiet, Frank, John, Clarence, and Charlie leave their cells through the openings they created in the walls and move toward the passage behind the cells. But at the last moment, Charlie loses his courage. Overcome with fear, he decides not to continue. Frank and the Anglin brothers realize they cannot wait any longer, so the three of them continue the escape without him. Frank and the Anglin brothers move through the passage and climb up to the roof of the prison while carrying the flotation equipment they prepared. Once they reach the top, they carefully move across the roof while avoiding the searchlights. After reaching the edge of the building, they climb down the outside wall into the prison yard. From there, they move across the yard, climb over the barbed wire fence, and make their way toward the shoreline of the island. Back inside the prison, Charlie finally gathers the courage to follow them. He leaves his cell and reaches the passage, but by the time he arrives, the others are already gone. Without their help, he cannot reach the shaft leading upward. Realizing that he cannot continue, Charlie returns to his cell. Meanwhile, Frank and the Anglin brothers reach the edge of the island where they had hidden their equipment. There, they inflate the raft they built from the raincoats. After preparing the raft, the three men push it into the water and climb aboard. Holding onto the raft and using their legs to move through the water, they begin crossing the bay and slowly disappear into the darkness of the night. The next morning, a guard comes to Frank's cell to move him to another cell as ordered by the warden. When the guard removes the blanket, he discovers the dummy head on the pillow. Realizing what has happened, he immediately raises the alarm. Soon, the prison is in chaos as the guards discover that Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers are missing, and a large search operation begins across the bay. During the search near Angel Island, officers find pieces of raincoat material and some personal belongings of the escaped men floating in the water. The warden insists this proves the prisoners drowned in the cold water. However, another officer suggests that the men might have thrown the items into the water to make it look like they had drowned. While searching the rocks on Angel Island, the warden notices a chrysanthemum flower head. At the same time, an aide informs him that he has been called to Washington to answer for the escape. When the aide mentions that chrysanthemums do not grow on Angel Island, the discovery suggests the men may have survived. The warden refuses to believe it, crushes the flower, and throws it into the water. No bodies are ever found, and the fate of Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers remains unknown. Less than a year later, Alcatraz prison is permanently closed. Well, that's the end of the movie, Escape from Alcatraz. How did you like this recap? Let me know in the comments below.